What's up, everybody, and welcome to my end of the year list. This is where every single year I talk about the movies of 2021, the good, the bad, the ugly, the most surprising, most disappointing, all of that stuff, as kind of a giant celebration of the last 12 months in film. So today we're going to be talking about the top 10 worst movies of 2021, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about the best movies of 2021 as the year has been closed out and we start anew with 2022. Now today and tomorrow's video are going to have exclusive companion videos over on my Patreon page. Today's will be the top 10 most disappointing movies of 2021 to companion with the worst. Those are movies that aren't necessarily the worst movies that I've seen all year, but movies where my expectations were at a certain point and the actual reception that I walked out with the movie was just the biggest disparity between them. There's some movies on that list that I actually do like, but I expected them to be great. So that is exclusive to patrons. If you want to contribute to this channel, Patreon really is the best way to do that. And there's a lot of exclusive perks for your guys' support, such as exclusive videos like that. There's also polls every single month to choose videos that are more often than not ranking videos. I give away Blu-ray digital copy codes. I do exclusive live Q&As over there. So a lot of things that I try to do, including producing entire videos just for my supporters on Patreon. So please consider, if you enjoy this channel, if you enjoyed this video, contributing to the health of the channel with that Patreon contribution, and I thank you for your consideration for that. Now, talking about the top 10 worst movies of 2021, one thing I need to get out of the way really quick, there become this negative stigma over these videos, especially on Twitter, with a couple of filmmakers especially kind of jumping in on the argument. And I think it needs to be said that yes, there are content creators, there are YouTubers and film critics that overuse hyperbole and talk about movies that like they're absolute garbage and they're trash, and they just try to have these buzzwords to try to succeed off of hate. Those guys you can absolutely be pissed at, but a lot of us content creators that wrap up the end of the year with our best and our worst, it's just a celebration of the year. And you cannot talk about the best times that you had at the movie theater without acknowledging the ones that were very disappointing for you. It doesn't mean we're trying to shit on these movies. It doesn't mean we're giving a middle finger to the filmmakers. It just means we're acknowledging both spectrums of our experiences in the theaters in 2021. So on the small chance that people like Scott Derrickson are actually watching this video, that's my explanation and that's my justification for it. So I actually am somebody that, while this will be changing going forward, since I'm going to have a lot more time to give movies a chance, I avoid a lot of movies that I have a pretty good idea that I'm not going to like. So there's quite a few movies on this list that are not necessarily bad or even terrible, but these are the bottom 10 experiences that I had in 2021. Starting off at number 10 with The Matrix Resurrections. Now, this is a movie that seems to be all over the place as far as how people are receiving it. I see people on Twitter calling it a masterful, genius masterpiece, the best way to do a legacy sequel, and just acting like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And if that's legit, I'm glad they enjoyed it on that level. I also see people calling it the worst thing ever and the worst Matrix movie and makes Revolutions look like a masterpiece. I don't quite buy into that either, but if that's how bad of an experience you had, I'm very sorry. And then a lot of people in the middle, like me, to where there's ideas that they like, there's certain approaches that they like that were surprising, that were unique. And at the same time, a lot of the same level of confusion regarding why are we doing this? Why are we retreading this? Why is this person playing this role and not the original actor? And just, it was a giant hodgepodge of confusion for me throughout this entire movie, to where somebody who absolutely adores the original movie and has always been lukewarm at best and just flat out detesting the two sequels at worst, this just didn't do anything to get me back into Matrix hype. This did absolutely nothing to make me have more rejuvenated faith in this franchise. This did absolutely nothing to make me feel like The Matrix should not have been a one and done, which I have always said it should have been. And it's a movie that just didn't really do anything for me at the end of the day. I didn't think the action was all that exciting. I didn't think what they did with the characters was all that great. And the story, to me, just couldn't figure out whether or not it wanted to do this crazy, modern, meta, subverting expectations direction, or completely retread the original movie to the point where, beat for beat, I knew everything that was going to happen, even in the action sequences. So this just did not work for me. Number 9 is going to be Eternals. This is the one and only MCU movie that I walked out of and flat out said I did not like that. Even movies like Captain Marvel, which I think above Eternals is my least favorite MCU movie, I walked out of it going, that was fine. It was okay. I could watch that again and not really be mad, but it didn't do a whole lot for me. Eternals, I don't care if I really ever watch again. I mean, I probably will. You gotta rank these movies once every, what, like 3 fucking months at this point? But Eternals, to me, this felt like a lot of ideas, a lot of ambition, a lot of crazy different exploration of themes and stories and cosmic stuff that we haven't seen in the MCU, but it just didn't come together very well. It felt like these characters were like low-rent copies of the Justice League. If the Eternals came out before the Justice League in comic book lore, I don't fucking know that, so I don't care. But in the movie, you literally have a character that is almost identical to Superman. You got somebody that's almost identical to Wonder Woman, someone that's almost identical to the Flash. They even make in-jokes about the DC universe. And the whole storyline about these celestial, powerful beings, not really sure if they want to save humanity or not. Not exactly the best storyline to go for when you got people watching your movies, so I just didn't get into this. Didn't think the action or anything beyond how beautiful the movie looked really did anything for me. It was by far the most disappointing experience I have ever had with an MCU film in well over a decade. Number 8, oh man, The Many Saints of Newark. This is a movie that the trailers sold me so much that this was going to be an awesome throwback to modern mobster classics like Goodfellas, like Casino, or something along those lines. And man, I had so much faith that this was going to be awesome. I literally watched the entire fucking series of The Sopranos. I put almost 100 hours of work into leading up to this film because I was so excited and so filled with faith that it was going to be awesome. And this was just a dud, just an okay average mob movie that even with just watching The Sopranos and having everything in that show really fresh in my mind, it added nothing to the show. It answered no questions. All it did was bring up other questions that inevitably they're not going to answer because apparently that's what the fucking showrunner likes to do, is just not answer shit and then tell you the answers are all there. So it was a movie that just, character-wise, didn't have anything really that interesting. The best thing that it had going for it was Gandolfini's son playing Tony Soprano. I thought he was incredible, and if they wanted to do a mini-series with him as young Tony, I would be there in a second. But everything else beyond that just felt like this average, okay, passable attempt at trying to rekindle some Sopranos nostalgia, and really, it seems across the board that all Sopranos fans, for the most part, either thought this was just okay or an absolute crushing disappointment. So, man, what a waste of a lot of fucking time on my end. Number 7 is going to be F9, The Fast Saga. This is the 9th Fast and Furious film. Now, I'm somebody that I've actually been a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise from the beginning. There's a lot of people that thought it was trash until Fast 5. And I've been a long-time fan of these movies. But for me personally, after reaching pretty much perfection with Fast 5, one of my favorite action films of all time, each sequel after that has given me diminishing returns. They've either gone bigger and crazier and stupider, or they have gone dumber with the plot, or it's been more ridiculous as far as the circumstances that they're able to survive, to the point where they might as well just be fucking superheroes at this point. And Fast 8, or Furious 8, or whatever the fuck that was called, The Fate of the Furious, was the first Fast and Furious movie that I legitimately just did not like. So I had low expectations walking into this as it is. I thought the trailers were terrible. I thought that it looked like they were just going way far off the rails with how ridiculous it was. And it was surprising that they still had further to go, because it felt like they had already reached that point with F8. This movie was terrible. The characters don't feel like characters anymore. Dom feels like the dude could fucking survive a meteor shower at this point. I mean, it just... The Rock not being there is certainly a blow, although I think that he's much better without this franchise. The story didn't really merit these people getting back together. It just feels like it's just really running on steam at this point. The stunts and the action is so fucking laughably stupid that I can't get invested in it. There's no tension because there's no tether to reality. And so even if you walk into this movie knowing it's going to be incredibly stupid, knowing it's going to be incredibly ridiculous, over-the-top escapism, I still think it fails completely to deliver that because it just goes too far with all of those elements. So this is the one Fast and Furious movie that I will flat out tell you I thought was terrible. Number 6 is going to be Cherry. Now, this is a movie that had the potential to be incredible because of purely who is involved with it. You had the Russo brothers that just delivered 4 incredible MCU blockbusters in a row with Captain America Winter Soldier, Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and then finally Endgame, which became the highest grossing film of all time. These guys literally could do anything. They could write a check to make any movie they wanted at this point. And they chose to do this story about war veterans and opioid crisis, with Tom Holland trying to break out of his stigma and his Peter Parker mold as much as possible. And so I was really intrigued at why this. If you could do anything that you possibly wanted in the world, why are we telling this story? You must really have something special in store for us. And unfortunately, when you watch this movie, they have absolutely nothing in store for us. The only thing I walked away knowing in this end of this movie is that Tom Holland's a fucking incredible actor, and he can do pretty much whatever he wants. And he's still going to have a lot of struggles breaking that stigma, because as incredible as he is with his performance here, that's still the biggest weakness of his presence in this film, is that you got a guy talking about fucking chicks, pushing guts back into people in a war zone, doing opioids, like shitting blood and walking around in his underwear, and all I see is Peter Parker doing all of these things. And so it's like this huge disconnect as an audience member not being able to buy into the story. But you have all of these different themes, all these different subjects they're trying to tackle in this movie, these really important, dark, uncomfortable things, and it just doesn't feel like they have anything to say about it. They're just showing it to you. And it's like, well, fuck, I knew that shit was bad. What are you trying to tell me about it? What am I here for? What are you educating me on? And it just felt like nothing. And it doesn't help the fact that as an audience member, it's very hard to get into this movie that is already hard to watch and already hard to enjoy on just a basic entertainment level, when the two protagonists that all of these events are surrounding are some of the most unlikable people I have ever seen in a film in my life. So Cherry to me was like a 2.5 hour slog. Unfortunately, all of the accolade and all of the prowess that they gained with those MCU films, after you make something like this, I think that they're going to struggle a bit getting funding for any crazy idea that they might not have that's not going to be like the Avengers. So giant misfire. Number 5 is going to be Willys Wonderland. Now, this is a movie that just kind of came out of nowhere. All I saw was Nicolas Cage doing this Five Nights at Freddy's concept. Now, he's had a nice, interesting little third wind in his career doing these little B-movie straight-to-video concepts that some have been very successful, like Mandy, others kind of floating under the radar, but anytime Nicolas Cage has attached himself to a project over the past 5 or 6 years, it's always very intriguing. Whether or not you love the guy, whether or not even you like the last couple of movies that he's done, the concept alone always draws you in, at least it does to me. So I walked into this movie, if nothing else, expecting to have a zany little B-movie time with crazy Nicolas Cage kicking ass on all of these little haunted animatronics. And to me, this movie just missed the mark. It was just such an easy concept to execute, and just felt like they made all these weird stylistic choices to try to be unique or different or to look artistic, and it just took away from the basic concept. I mean, Nicolas Cage is an actor that you pretty much only hire nowadays if you want somebody to be crazy and over the top and talk like this. And the guy has 0 fucking lines the entire movie. That's almost as bad as taking away Deadpool's mouth in X-Men Origins. You don't fucking hire Nicolas Cage to be a silent protagonist. Beyond all of that, even if you get over the fact that you're taking away one of Nicolas Cage's greatest assets as an actor in a B-movie, the action, carnage, whatever you want to call it, with him taking out these little haunted animatronics is not even all that interesting, because there's no gore, there's no carnage, there's no genuine, like, cool choreography or tension during these scenes. It's just kind of silly. And so everything that was potentially awesome about this concept just feels like it was the most lukewarm, boring, passable parts of the movie. And so at the end, I was just left with this weird B-movie concept that just kind of felt like the idea of it was so much better than the reality. Number 4 is going to be Coming to America. Of all the movies that I will be talking about over the next couple of days, this is the only one that I could not even finish. And some would maybe argue that that means it should be number 1, but I've had movies that unfortunately I did finish and had a worse experience with. I did not have a whole lot of faith in this in the initial conception when people were announcing this, whenever they were talking about Netflix and all the things that might come with this if it's successful. And slowly, over the year or so while it was in production, things behind the scenes, things that people were talking about, little behind the scenes videos of like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence getting on lunch break on Bad Boys for Life and going to hang out with Eddie Murphy on the set, and things like that just started to get me a little excited. And I'm like, you know what? Like, Eddie Murphy or his agent have made the most horrible decisions possible since the 90s, but this might be the one. Maybe this is the one where they rolled the dice and said, you know what? This is a good thing. This is a good decision. We'll go back to one of your classic 80s properties and we'll revisit what made that so great. And we'll all remember again how amazing of a comedic talent Eddie Murphy is. And this movie was an absolute shit show. It was not funny in the least. For all of the effort that they took to recreate the visuals and the costumes and the energy and bringing the entire fucking cast back from the first film, they put zero effort into the story. They put zero effort into the script, to the point where they make one of the most classic, horrible mistakes you can do with a sequel in completely destroying one of the best aspects of the first film, which is the character of Akeem. You take Eddie Murphy's character, which was this lovable, like almost ridiculously positive person in the first film, and you turn him into this selfish asshole in the second film, to where he is literally willing to sacrifice a blood relative that he didn't even know fucking existed to save another blood relative, and that just does not fit with the character that he was in the previous film. So you make the main draw for the movie an unlikable character to make us focus on another character that we don't know and don't give a fuck about. So I got about halfway, 2/3 of the way through this movie and just gave up. I realized that this was one of the times where I could use the next 30 minutes doing something more productive. There's not going to be anything in the back third of this movie that is going to change or redeem my problems thus far. And yet again, we are left with Eddie Murphy, who I love to death, making a terrible career decision and once again slipping back into, I hate to say it, but irrelevance. To the point where you watch something that's so amazing like the first film, like the Beverly Hills Cop movies, like the old stand-up, and you're like, where the fuck is this guy? Come back, we need you, Eddie. And every time he feels like he's coming back, you get a movie like this. Number 3 is going to be M. Night Shyamalan's Old. I hated this movie, and I'm actually surprised how little people hate it on the level that I do, because I'm a fan of M. Night Shyamalan. I'm a defender of M. Night Shyamalan. Most of his movies, or well, at least half of his movies, won't I go as far as saying most, about half of his movies are in my favorites of all time. His first 3 films, Signs, Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable, I think are flawless just about. I loved Split, I loved Glass. I even get some enjoyment out of a couple of movies there in the middle. I don't think they're quite as terrible as people make it out to be, some of them at least. But after Glass, which admittedly was divisive, but I was on the end that really loved what he did with it. I thought, man, this guy's back. This guy's finally back. He did pretty good with The Visit. He did great with Split. He did really good with Glass. He's back. He's out of the depths of hell. And then he comes out with this that seems like a really interesting concept that just absolutely shits the bed all the way through. Really neat little simple concept that inevitably is going to have some third act twist, and the trailers just sold me enough. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm there. Let's see what he's got. And you have a group of characters that are just basic, underdeveloped caricatures that are brought onto this beach with some of the worst dialogue and line delivery that I have seen all year long. And it's basically a 90-minute exploration of body horror of what happens if you just age rapidly on this beach. And every single isolated event that happens to these characters don't really feel like they're tying together in any form of a narrative. It's just these isolated little ideas that they're trying to explore all at once. You literally have 2 children that are like 7, 8 years old that age up to their 20s in a couple of hours and go fuck in a tent. And the movie doesn't even address this. It just happens and then says, we're moving on. And you're like, what the fuck just happened? You got a woman with a bone disease where her bones can break really easily, so she'll break something and it'll heal all fucked up instantly. They explore like this ultra realistic thing about like what would happen if you did age that rapidly. An infection could kill you in seconds. And so like somebody will get stabbed with a rusty knife and the rust poison will go all through his body in seconds and kill them. And yet, minutes earlier, you had somebody that literally was cut open with a bullshit little knife that somebody had in their pocket. A tumor is pulled out of their abdomen, and then their skin closes back and heals, and there's no infection there, even though her whole fucking body was exposed for, if you're following the timeline of how they aged, like for a full couple of weeks, for the few minutes that it was open on the beach. And so by the end of the film, you get to the twist, and the twist just makes it even worse, because at a certain point in the movie, you're not having very fun, you're not enjoying the concept, you're really seeing all of the flaws of M. Night Shyamalan's script writing on full display, and you go, okay, just tell me what the twist is, because you're either going to redeem all of this, or you're going to piss me off with what the hell you have in store for me. And when you get to the third act, and you see what the explanation is for all the events that we've just suffered through for the past 90 minutes, you really want to just throw fucking tomatoes at the screen. It's like, dude, what the fuck was that? You just wanted to make some political statement, so you wrote this bullshit movie to sneak that in the last 5 minutes, and they don't even really feel like they connect all that well. For somebody that loves M. Night Shyamalan whenever he is on the ball, it is so crushingly disappointing whenever he churns out something like this and just loses all the credibility that he has built for the past 3 movies. Number 2 is going to be Prisoners of the Ghostland. Now, I saw this very early this year whenever I was doing my coverage of Sundance, and this was the last movie that I watched during the festival. And from the poster alone, I figured this was going to be the one movie that I walked out of Sundance telling everybody to look out for whenever it finally got distribution. Just like I said with Willys Wonderland, when you show Nicolas Cage on top of this samurai fucking helmet, and it's got this concept where he's going to walk in almost like Shogun style and take on this little western town, I'm like, dude, there is no possible fucking way that that's not going to be awesome. And I hated this movie. This thing was so fucking weird and bizarre and off-kilter and zany that it has to appeal to somebody that likes those things, that just likes everything being so strange that it's appealing to them. But for me, again, just like with Willys Wonderland, when you give me Nicolas Cage against samurais in this western town, and you star Bill Moseley of all people as one of the villains, and I get a picture in my head of how awesome that's going to be on just a basic concept level, and you go way the fuck in that direction with where you're going with it, I didn't understand what I was watching. I mean, there's literally a scene where he gets like punched or shot in the balls where Nicolas Cage is just jumping up and down like fucking Bugs Bunny holding his dick. And I'm like, is that really what we're going for in 2021? Is that really what you hired this guy to do? You actually wrote that on paper and thought that that was going to translate well to a festival film in 2021? Okay, but my number 1 worst film of 2021 snuck in there right at the end of the year, and that is Home Sweet Home Alone. Now, I am one of the 8 people on planet Earth that when I saw Disney acquire 20th Century Fox and they started Disney Plus and they started announcing all of these things that they were putting into production, and one of those was a modern reboot of the Home Alone franchise, I was one of the few people that said, that's a good idea. If anybody can do it right, it's Disney. They have failed numerous times trying to recapture the magic of the first 2 films, and if it's even close to possible, they are the ones that are going to be able to do it, and putting it on Disney Plus is probably a good place for it, because it's not going to succeed in the theaters. I have faith in you. Go ahead, make a good film. And I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to get a screener of this movie about a week before all of you saw it. And when I sat down to watch this with my family, I was literally shocked at how horrible this movie was. And I'm somebody that actually had faith in it, so God forbid, I could imagine how much you hated it if you walked in expecting it to suck. You take the concept of Home Alone, lovable, cute kid that is left home alone because of circumstances, and then has to defend his house in the third act against villains in a very slapstick, kind of Three Stooges, Bugs Bunny type way, to where it's very fun and enjoyable to watch 2 bad people get torn apart by an 8-year-old kid. Very hard to fuck up that concept in conception alone. And what do? They make the kid an annoying little prick, and they make the 2 burglars sympathetic people that are not trying to rob him, that are actually being wronged by the kid. And somehow we're supposed to enjoy the third act to where this kid is literally fucking torturing these 2 people for about 30 minutes straight in very over-the-top painful ways. Not even in a slapstick way like the first 2 movies. There's a point where he loads a Nerf gun with thumbtacks, and the woman gets shot in the fucking face numerous times with this automatic Nerf gun, and she's innocent. And so the whole movie, like, just writing alone, humor alone, the movie fails in just about every aspect. You have this forced cameo with Buzz just to somehow, like, give narrative to this actually being within the universe of the first two films, because the McAllisters are an actual thing, but that's as far as it goes. There's no actual effort in actually tying these movies together in a meaningful way. So even if they didn't do this conceptual faux pas, the thing would just be a dud. But when you do that, you absolutely destroy the entire enjoyment factor of a Home Alone film, to the point where the entire third act of the film, as an adult, you just feel terrible for what you're watching. You're like, dude, fuck that kid. Why are we watching this? And then, I could rant on this movie. I really feel terrible that I was so busy when this came out that I could not do a rant-filled review, because I was literally physically angry when I watched this movie because of how much potential it had. And just how much on a conceptual level this was fucking idiotic. When you have people that are as smart at making content like this as Disney, that saw on a fucking draft paper that we're going to do this subverting expectations thing that unfortunately destroys the entire concept and the entire enjoyment factor of what a Home Alone movie is supposed to be, and nobody said, back up, we're not doing that, it's insulting. It's insulting to fans. And the fact that Disney putting the level of production and budget behind this movie that nobody else would have done and possibly made the worst Home Alone film is a travesty. So continue to watch the first two films every single year on the Christmas and during the holidays. And if you have not already experienced this garbage ass reboot that is Home Sweet Home Alone, don't even bother with it, because it does not deserve your view. So that is it, guys. That is my top 10 worst movies of 2021. Some decent movies on this list. The ones there at the end, you can tell my passion. They were just very infuriating experiences. And hopefully the people that made them learn from the reception of their movies and try to do better, especially M. Night Shyamalan. But nonetheless, let me know down below what your top 10 worst movies of the year have been. And be sure, if you are considering to check out my Patreon page, to look down below in the link for that. You can check out all the different tiers that are available and what benefits come along with those, one of which being the companion video to this, my top 10 most disappointing films of 2021. So thank you guys for considering that. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.